Okay, everybody, so today we're going to get into the ancient Americas and just talking about some groups that came before our most well known are the Maya. And again, I'm going to give you some information. The overarching problem with everybody that I'm going to talk about today, okay, is that we don't have a written language at all, whatsoever. So everything I'm telling you is what we've been able to get from what other people wrote about them or archaeological evidence. Okay, so here we go, the ancient Americas. So, really, when it comes down to settlements and the agricultural revolution and stuff, we talk about Mesoamerica, or an area you would call Central America and Mexico. So, really, Mexico down through Panama are the areas where we see our first major settlement. And if you remember, it's been a while since we talked about the Americas. We think the earliest people were in the Americas was around 15,000 years ago, although there's some debate to that. And one of the areas where we really start to see the earliest cultivation of crops is at Teotihuacan in Mexico, circa 8,000 years ago. Around that time, that's when we start to see the heavy use of agriculture. Okay, so you're putting about 6,000 BCE or so, not nearly to the degree of some of the areas in the Middle East, but still, of course, a really, really long time ago. And the first culture that we talk about here are the Olmecs. Now, I have named with a question mark. We do not know what they called themselves, okay? This is what other groups refer to them, and they refer to them as the rubber people. So we wonder if they're one of the first groups to ever use rubber. Original rubber did come from the sap of a tree, so maybe they used it. We do know from archaeological evidence that they had quite a few different crops that they would use. Things like, beans and peppers, and we have early tomatoes and chilies, avocados, squash, and gourds. But the most important out of all of them was maize, or what we call corn. What is most impressive about these guys is, and we don't really see this much in any other civilization to this degree, is that original maize, the corn that you see here, would have been very, very small and almost non-existent. And so they were able to use cross-pollination and actually genetically modify, that's right, in a natural way, bigger and better corn. It's remarkable. It's absolutely insane when you think about that they were able to even do that, okay? Because they needed to do as much as they could with their agriculture because, the animals they had some turkeys and dogs, but nothing for labor. There's some evidence that they, believe it or not, they bred some types of guinea pigs for food. I mean, there's really not a lot of, again, these animals here, which we've talked about already. So as a result, this was really important. And we also know that this is important in the writings of some other ancient societies about them, that indeed they actually felt that humans were made from maize in a similar way. So that was really, really crucial, and that crop was amazing that they were able to do it. This just gives you an idea of where the Olmecs were at. Okay, some of the different crops. You have basalt, which is a great stone to work with, and jade. That was probably one of their biggest, most valuable things. Not a lot of gold and silver found at this time, but we definitely see trade because we see, so jade's up here, but we also see jade way down here. You see a little bit of jade here, so everything had to go back and forth. There was no necessarily empire or anything along that line. We do just know that they were lots of villages, cities all over the place. You can see all the different sites we've been able to find over time. Now, they were really big on villages and cities. Now, it seemed like the cities that they built were areas that either were A, for trade, or B, what we call ceremonial centers. Okay, so on the left you see here San Lorenzo. This city we believe was kind of for trade. As you can see, there are definitely the bases of some large structures here. Seems to be fairly well planned out. On the right here is the city of La Venta. Now you see this type of altar thing. We believe that they were a polytheistic group, believing in multiple gods, and that indeed that these areas were used to people for them to come to worship. So they didn't necessarily have the cities that you and I have today, most of them living in villages. But we do know they were really, really big on art. This is a jade death mask. This would have been put over the face of somebody very important. We have unearthed a variety of different grave sites, and we find graves with a bunch of stuff and graves with not very much. They were also big on other types of sculpture. This is my personal favorite, this weird baby thing. I really don't know what's going on, but you got to show it, right? If you find that, there's no doubt probably going to freak somebody out here. But what they're most famous for are these gigantic heads, and we have found hundreds of these things all throughout the jungles of Central America. Okay, they have interesting facial features. Some people want to say when they look at the style of the heads that it's very reminiscent of Egypt, and that there could have been some ancient connection between the Egyptians and the Americas. I'll talk about that a little bit later in class. But we see these everywhere. So we see a society that could do lots of different art. They made jewelry and pottery. They traded a lot. And these guys would really be the basis of the great culture that would follow, which would be the Maya that we'll be talking about in our next unit. Now, another big city, now here I put it here, Teotihuacan. Okay, this city is in Mexico, and let me just give you, this is an aerial shot of it today. Imagine all of these areas filled with places that people could live. Okay, I'm going to pop back a little bit here. Now, Teotihuacan, regular historians say this was operational from 200 BCE to 650 CE, and that it was outside of the realm of the Maya. No one really knows who built it. It seemed to be a city amongst itself. There's evidence, however, that it could go all the way back to 1500 BCE plus. So I put it here because what we also see are the rise of these independent, strong cities. Okay, this was an incredibly well-organized city. It had different zones that were residential and commercial. A lot of the houses were actually rounded, and then the larger buildings would be apartments and things along that line. We had streets. Very, very large. We found pottery shops and blacksmithy type things. Well, not blacksmith because we don't have any metal, but other craftsmen and whatnot. We know that they traded a lot because we found a lot of stuff in Teotihuacan. Most of it is not from the area. This is only about 100 miles away from Mexico City, so it's a little bit further north than, say, where the Mayas and what lived. So it's really, really impressive. Now, at some point, it gets destroyed through fire. Much of the city was burned down. We find lots of different evidence of that. We don't really know how it happened, but that's just what we know occurred. And as I see here, this is like a modern-day reproduction of the city. You can see very well organized, pretty impressive. Now, we also see lots of art. Here's a painting on a wall in a tomb. The tombs are very lavish for the leaders. Lots of pyramids in this area, and it seems the pyramids serve the same function as the pyramids did in Egypt. Another interesting combination there. But you see all the the feathers and serpents, and really, really cool. And here itself is a tomb. And you look at this is just incredible. You see these serpent heads really big. Most of the, because there's lots of snakes in this area. Not surprising, we see snake gods all over the place. This is a really, really impressive tomb. We see the jade and all the different types of stonework here. It's awesome. But their biggest structure, no doubt, was the Pyramid of the Sun. Okay, let's just take a look at it over here. This is the Pyramid of the Sun. Now, it is believed that Teotihuacan is created, that it was kind of like a solar map, and that it actually was either a scale model of the solar system or a model that based the buildings on the phases of Venus. We're not 100% sure, again, because we really don't know who built it. But this building is absolutely massive. It was like 212 feet tall, which made it the third largest building in the world in ancient times, only to be eclipsed by the pyramid, which was over 400 feet tall. And then there's another pyramid, an earthen pyramid in Guatemala, that could have been built by either the Maya or the Olmecs, not 100% sure there, that's like 220 feet tall. But this has the same exact base as the pyramid in Giza. Same exact. So it's just shorter. And to give you an idea of the size, again, this is a balloon that's going over it, so you can see it's pretty impressive. But what we see here is just this massive, again, monumental architecture. This proves that you are a successful society. This tells us that you have, even though we don't have writing, we have sophisticated mathematics and engineering. We know this. And remember, all this done by hand because we have no animals here. Now, the other area, of course, is also South America. We think the earliest that humans got down here was about 12,000 BCE, and the first evidence of agriculture that we have is an area in Peru near the city of Caral, okay, which we see here, okay, and we actually have pyramid structures here, a large basin, pretty impressive. But the big group at this time in ancient times were the Chavan. You also had a group called the Mohica that were also present in South America, but the Chavan were really the main ones here, okay? Around 2500 BCE, we know they get established, okay? They grew things like beans, sweet potatoes, peanuts. The potato is going to be really the key thing that comes from here because you don't have great soil when you live in and around the mountains, and beans don't need a ton of great soil, but neither do potatoes. And you have dozens of different varieties of potatoes, and we also see similar kind of genetic engineering and cross-pollination techniques used with potatoes down here that the Olmecs would use with their maize. We see lots of temples and art, as you can see some art down here, and an interconnected group of cities. And you see this map, here's the Chavan actual, I'm not going to call it an empire, but this is the civilization, and north and south here you have influence. But we see this interconnected group of cities. We definitely see trade that went on, and it was just a really, really impressive civilization that existed up in the mountains. And these guys would be the ultimate precursors to the Inca that we'll talk about later. But probably was the biggest for them is the city of Chavan de Huantar. And here's just an example of part of it. You see this is a massive city. You look at all these blocks and buildings up here. You see these large stone here. Okay, and over here we have some like monster thing. Got some teeth. Okay, he's holding something. He's got some cool hair. Snakes for hair. Medusa-ish. Watch that guy. But again, we see art and everything. We just don't have any writing, and I wish I could tell you so much more about the Americas, but I'm pretty much going to end the video here because we just don't have the writing. We just don't have the knowledge. We don't know what's going on here. Hopefully one day we'll stumble across some stuff, but what is important to know is that in the Americas you had sophisticated civilizations that were just as big as some of the other ones that you saw across the world. They're just a little bit younger. All right, so make sure we get our assignment done, and I will see you guys soon.